Welcome to the Red Pill Sports and Entertainment Show. My name is Albert Apache and I am your host. Well guys, it's a beautiful day in the Valley of the Sun, and that means I'm recording outside so I can enjoy the weather. So please excuse any of the outside sounds that you might hear passing by. But anyhow, let's go ahead and get into today's show. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why I think it's really important that we get young boys involved in contact sports, football, lacrosse, hockey, and in particular combat sports, you know, boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, even a taekwondo school if in fact they spar. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because I really feel like that physical contact, that physical impact is really good for young boys to understand how to get over a fear of, you know, confrontation and being able to set boundaries, specifically like with bullies and things of that nature, as well as understanding conflict resolution, you know, so that they have the tools to understand that, hey, just because something can get heated doesn't always mean it has to be physical. And then, you know, because of the lack of father figures in the home today, the whole concept of being exposed to healthy masculinity, all we tend to hear about in the media is, you know, toxic masculinity this and toxic masculinity that and this, that, and the other. And, you know, they need to see a healthy masculinity, and, you know, that it can be healthy and that it is healthy. Male role models, you know, positive male role models, but in particular, not just positive male role models, but positive male role models whom are strong and are in a teacher role and in a power of authority. You know, young men see women a lot in the teacher's role. They see women a lot in, you know, positions of authority in their schools and things of that nature. But they're really not exposed to men who are powerful in a position of authority as children. So they really need to be exposed to that. And so that they can also get, you know, a feeling for what it is for a man to, you know, manifest as either a wise king or a tyrant king, because they will have good coaches, they will have bad coaches, you know, so that they get a feeling for the light side and the dark side, if you will. And then, you know, also, you know, in contact sports, more so than in finesse sports, and in particular in combat sports, I really feel like it illustrates the concept of working smart and working hard, right? A lot of times this is what we hear, this message we hear all the time is work smarter, not harder, right? When really the message we should be sending is work smarter and harder, right? It should be both. It's not one or the other. And it also gives us a real feel for, you know, an immediate understanding of hard work being more important than talent or potential, right? You'll see a lot of athletes come and go, young athletes that have amazing amounts of talent or potential, but they never quite live up to it because they aren't willing, or there's nobody there to push them to do the hard work that it takes to develop that talent. And so they'll get an idea of that. And then also, I think it helps them develop, you know, a sense of potential, of meeting potential, of developing a purpose. In combat sports in particular, not just contact sports, but in combat sports, it's also a level of humbleness that you achieve in combat sports. You know, you're going to have a bad day at the gym. You're going to have a bad day in sparring, and there's always somebody that's a little bit better, a little bit quicker. And it really teaches how to fall in love with the journey, because of a combat sport is going to be part of your life for the rest of your life. you really can't focus on getting every single win every single time. You kind of have to focus on the journey of getting better, of developing yourself as an athlete. And, and then it can be part of you for the rest of your life. You can always be part of that sport. But if you're over concerned with always the destination and, that's it, it can be very, very humbling for you. So, there's that. We're also going to get into the NFL playoff picture. I mean, we're almost 2/3 through the season now, pretty close to it. And, let's just face it, about now we're getting a pretty clear idea who's going to get into the playoffs and who's not. And then sometime after Thanksgiving, we'll probably talk about the draft, because we'll even have a more clear idea of who's going to be in that #1 draft lottery, right? And then, of course, we'll get into some college football and all this 2-loss SEC team nonsense that they're talking about, and how, how does that two-loss SEC team get in over other people, and why this system is just so broken. And until things are changed, it doesn't matter if you go to a 6-team playoff or you go to an 8-team playoff or a 10-team playoff, because what will happen if you allow the SEC fanboys to get away with this is it'll start to move. Those goalposts will move, and then next time it'll be, well, a 3-loss SEC team should be in, right? They'll continue to move the goalposts. So, we'll talk about some of that. And then we're going to talk really quickly. I really don't like getting into the NBA this early into the season. That being said, I just have to kind of talk about the crazy NBA, media types. They're sounding the alarms, and we know that, the NBA season is so early. I mean, even NBA players have admitted that pretty much up until the All-Star break is kind of the preseason. I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't matter, but if you're 1 or 2 percentage points away from being 500 going into the All-Star break, there's still a pretty good shot that you can be a playoff team. I mean, half the teams in the league get in. And, the NBA maybe really needs to start thinking about shortening up the season. I mean, I'm not talking about let's shorten it down to the strike season where it was 42 games, but maybe down to 60 games. I mean, why are they even trying to compete with the NFL right now? I can't believe that they're really making money in attendance at games right now, or even in revenue. I can't believe that, the revenue for ads is as high as it could be later on in the season, because, I mean, let's face it, you're competing with college football, you're competing with the NFL, and you're competing with college basketball, which is much more exciting at this point than the NBA. The games mean a lot more. But, we'll talk a little bit about how the craziness of, okay, let's start sounding alarm bells, okay? And then, of course, we're going to talk some MMA and UFC, combat sports, and really want to talk about DC and his whole idea of, he's the one that came out and basically said that he wanted to fight for basically legacy and money. And this last fight with Derek Lewis, I don't think you can legitimately say that that fight was for either one of those. We'll jump into that. His possibility of him fighting Brock, yeah, that maybe is a moneymaker. But as far as his legacy, you have some people coming out and defending DC and saying he doesn't have to fight Jon Jones a 3rd time for his legacy. And I kind of don't see it that way. I mean, DC, it's not the fans that are running around saying that DC should be considered, pound for pound, one of the best fighters of all time, right? The GOAT. It's actually DC that put out the idea that I have to be in that conversation. Well, if you have to be in that conversation, and there's a possibility that your last fight could be against your nemesis, who has beat you legitimately one time, had one win stripped away from them because of performance-enhancing drugs, violation, but still knocked you out the 2nd time. I mean, you can't legitimately go, I don't feel like you can continue to talk about, I need to be in the conversation for GOAT if you're not willing to fight your nemesis for a third time. And the reality is that fight could take place in either heavyweight or light heavyweight. I think Jon Jones would be willing to move up if his fight with Gustafsson goes well, if he were to beat Gustafsson and he was healthy enough to fight pretty quickly on a quick turnaround. I don't see why you wouldn't want that fight. Not only would that add to your legacy if you beat him as DC and solidify your position as the GOAT, but it also makes monetary sense, which is what he said he wanted. Those were the two things he was talking about when he said he wanted to get in a couple more fights before, you know, his 40th birthday. And if he's not going to fight one of those guys, I think he has to face another tough another tough heavyweight. So that's either got to be Stipe, or if they're healthy, the winner of the Curtis Blaydes-Ngannou fight, right? Which I think is going to be Curtis Blaydes. But either way, he has to fight somebody tough like that. If it really is about legacy, if it really is about making money, because those are the money-making fights. Those are the legacy fights. We're going to talk a little bit about Cowboy and Conor, and getting into that. Like, that could be a fight that could be on the horizon. Also being kicked around right now is Conor versus Aldo. That's really, really interesting fight. There's a lot of people that feel like Aldo got caught, and that had that fight lasted longer, it'd have been a much more competitive fight had Aldo not charged in, not allowed his emotions to take over. It was almost like Conor was waiting for him to rush in and was looking for that one specific punch. So people think that you know, could be an interesting rematch. We'll talk about that. Shevchenko and Joanna fighting coming up, or should it be Nico Montano? You know, let's talk a little bit. And then there's talk now that Askren's come over to the UFC, that it's going to be Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren. Interesting choice. I'm going to tell you why I think it's an interesting choice. And I think most MMA analysis guys and most hardcore fans know why it's an interesting choice that they chose Robbie Lawler. But, you know, we'll talk about it. Another thing that's been getting kicked around in the combat sports arena is, does Floyd Mayweather need the money so bad? I mean, we saw the whole, you know, oh, the fight was on with tension, now it's off, and now it might be back on. Does he need the money? Because if so, then that opens up the possibility to Maymac Part 2, right? I mean, let's see if that, what do you guys think of that? And then we're going to start our breakdown, because it's probably the most interesting fight of the year, at least for me. I think, you know, it's really interesting, not only because of the matchup, because of the weight class, because of the cardio, because of everything involved in this matchup. I really want to start talking about it early so we can really delve in. And that's the Holloway versus Ortega fight. All right, guys, let's get into it. Okay, guys, so like I said, forgive the background noise. I'm trying to enjoy the beautiful outside weather here in the Phoenix suburban area. So anyhow, let's get into it. The whole physical contact in combat sports, why it's important to young boys. First and foremost is the physical collision, the contact in an aggressive manner. It's super important. Number one, because boys are still boys. I know that's not a popular thing to say, but I really don't care. Boys are still boys, and, you know, they're going to roughhouse, and it's actually good for them to roughhouse. We see it across nature. This is what, you know, little, you know, boys, little wild things do, and it's okay. Secondly, when it really comes to bullying, it's really important, especially with boys, boy-on-boy bullying. It's very important that boys understand the concept of the collision so that they get over the fear of it, so that way they're no longer scared of it. They're not scared of an impact. They're not scared of a collision, a physical collision between bodies. That way they're more apt to say to the bully, hey, you're not going to bully me, okay? One of the biggest myths that has been perpetrated and perpetuated is this idea of ignore the bully. Okay, I can speak from personal experience, and I can also speak from what I've seen and what the new data is saying. And you know, when you ignore a bully, essentially what that is taken as is as consent. The bully takes your silence as consent. And many times the bully might even not even realize they're acting in a bully fashion. They might think that they're playing around. They might think that they're joking around. You know, everybody comes from a different culture, a different family set of values, and maybe joking around, maybe, you know, pushing and shoving and slapping, you know, on the back is a means of you know, bonding in the household. That's okay. That's not anybody's place to judge. If it's not physical abuse, that's, and when I say physical abuse, I really mean physical abuse, because I was physically abused. So it really upsets me when somebody tries to equate, you know, children being spanked with them being abused. It's not the same at all. I'm talking about true physical abuse, like where their hair's being pulled and they're throwing across the floor and kicked across the floor. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about abuse, okay, physical abuse. But anyhow, I digress. What I'm saying is that that might be a means of bonding in that household, the whole joshing with each other and giving each other a hard time. So the child might not even know that they are being a bully. So children need to address their bullies. Ignoring a bully is a bad idea. When a child does not have the fear of the physical collision of two bodies, all of a sudden he's more apt to draw the line and say, hey, you need to knock it off. I don't like that. And when the kid says, well, whatever he comes back with, he can say, well, you need to stop it or else. Because we all know what the bully, if a bully is truly a bully, right, and he's doing this for power and to get a rise and to try to have control, he's going to basically go to the or else what, okay? And this is where combat sports in particular are super important for boys, because at that point the boy has to have the ability to enforce his boundary. Not only set his boundary, he will set a boundary when he feels confident that he can enforce his boundary. And, you know, I don't want to take credit for that little set of words there. I want to say I heard that first from Henry Gracie, right? Children are more apt to set their boundaries when they know that they can physically enforce their boundaries. And so that's a super important part. Further, it also helps with conflict resolution. Children start to see, especially in the more contact-oriented sports, the football, the hockey, the lacrosse, the wrestling, the boxing, jiu-jitsu, all of these things where it's pretty physical, there's some collision, there's some throwing around, there is some body checking, all that kind of stuff going on. They realize that you can compete, be competitive, really take it to your opponent hard, trying to win, and still be friends afterwards, okay? And then lastly, when it comes to this, we really as parents and as adults need to start stepping back and allowing kids to solve their own problems. One of the biggest problems I see with young kids that I have to work with, and young kids that, you know, I see coming into the workforce, is they have zero conflict resolution skills. They are really, really good at their jobs. They're really proficient at doing whatever the skill is that they have. They get promoted to management. But because they've never developed conflict resolution skills, they're constantly looking for the authority figure to solve the problem. So what we've done essentially is we've taught these kids, well, if go tell a mom, go tell a dad, go tell a teacher, go tell go tell. And we never say, well, you guys need to work it out. You guys need to deal with it. You guys have to realize that this fighting and bickering and whatever else, this can't continue to go on. You have to have a better way to solve problems. But we've taught these kids that anytime they have a problem, just go find the authority figure. And then when they don't have conflict resolution skills, we're surprised. Well, we set that up. So there's that. Next, there is a lack of father figures in the household in today's society. That's just the reality. We have a lot of single parent households. Primarily, those are single or, primarily single mothers or mothers who the dad is, not at home. Maybe he contributes financially through child support, but for whatever reason, something's happened where he can't have very much visitation with the child. That's a topic for another day. But that being said, these contact sports is where you're going to find primarily the coaches will be male. And you will find masculinity and men that are in charge and in a place of authority and in the position of teacher and displaying masculinity. Now, something I want to quickly address. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity. I know that's not popular. Red pill alert here, everybody. Red pill alert. Probably going to upset some, feminist out there, but that's just too bad. There is no such thing as toxic masculinity. There is only such a thing as toxic people and toxic individuals. Okay, masculinity in and of itself is not toxic. Just like femininity in and of itself is not pure as the wind-driven snow. We all know plenty of women who are feminine in nature but are dirty, rotten scoundrels. Okay? That's just the truth of the matter. We all know somebody who's male or female, or we know people of both genders who are rotten, horrible people, and we know people from both genders that are, very, very positive people to have in our life. So please don't perpetuate that. If you're a single mom, this is what I'm going to ask you. Don't perpetuate that kind of talk, or don't allow it to be perpetuated around your boys. It's not good and it's not healthy for them. But that being said, finding good male role models, particularly as I mentioned in the teacher role and in the position of power and authority, okay, on a more day-to-day basis. So boys constantly, especially those that come from a single mother household, constantly see women in the position of teacher. They see women in the position of power and authority. They have their mothers at home. The vast majority of teachers in our school system today are female, but they very rarely see male teachers and masculine teachers, okay? This isn't very good, because what this kind of develops in a boy's head is that teaching, the responsibility of teaching, is a woman's job, is a female or feminine trait, okay? And that's really not how it goes. Men and women traditionally throughout history, right, both have been teachers, but teachers of different things and at different times in children's lives. And so it's very important that boys start to see that they have a responsibility to teach their peers, to teach their siblings, to teach the next generation. They have a responsibility to fill those positions of power and authority, okay? Because power and authority, right, being a leader means you're accountable. You're the last line of accountability when you're the leader, okay? I don't mean dictator, right? I don't mean manager, okay? That's not the same thing as being a leader. A leader is accountable to his people, okay? And that's what they need to see. And they won't always get the greatest coach or the greatest teacher, but that's okay, because they still need to see the vision of what it is for you to have a wise king and a tyrant king. And this is a super important idea as they get older, because they need to understand that you can be a very wise, benevolent, loving, masculine person and still be flawed. Every one of their coaches that is a good guy, that's a good coach, that's, got a lot of positive things, sometimes is going to make mistakes and have some attributes you don't particularly like. Well, conversely, a tyrant king is exactly the same, in the sense that he might really instill discipline and order on his team, but he does it in a tyrannical way. And so, since he does it in a tyrannical way, it isn't really a healthy environment. And since it's not a healthy environment, things don't really last the way they can. So this is why it's very important. So boys can see both sides of the coin. So, very often, I actually will allow my children to, when they have what I would even deem a bad teacher, or a teacher that they don't necessarily get along with, that doesn't really match their personality. As they get older and older, the more and more I allow that relationship to just kind of develop, because it's important for them to understand they're not always going to have positiveness. Everybody is not always going to be the wise king, right? Not everybody is always going to be the loving, protective mother, every female. Some are going to be the tyrant king, right? Some will be the Gorgon, right? That's how it's going to be. They're not all perfect. And so they have to learn to deal and navigate the world with both types of people. And then lastly, and again, this is more particular, I think, to combat sports, or it shows up earlier in combat sports than it does overall contact sports. But in combat sports, I think that the concept and the idea of working hard outperforms raw talent or raw potential is something that children grasp at a very young age in combat sports. They start to see that just because I have talent, just because I have potential, that doesn't mean anything. I must work hard and work smart. Not one, not the other, both. It has to be both. And this is a missing ingredient for so many of our boys today. They have been told over and over again in society, the message is work smarter, work smarter, work smarter, work behind a desk, do a pencil pusher job, go to school, get a good job so you don't have to work so hard. And that has been the wrong message. And I'm going to be honest, I was guilty of perpetuating that message for the early part of my children's lives as well. And then it dawned on me that I had made a mistake. And we were making a mistake. Working smart is fantastic. But working smart and only working smart is counterproductive. You must be able to work smart and hard. So next, we also have the idea that it helps to develop your idea of potential and purpose, right? When you have potential in a sport, you start to develop your purpose in that sport. You start to understand, oh, look, this is how you develop a purpose. It becomes a microcosm of life, most combat sports. And what I mean by that is that you learn very quickly that you need to fall in love with the journey if this is going to be a lifelong thing, if you're going to have this particular sport in your life for the duration of your lifetime. Because you can't be over concerned with the outcome of every sparring match, with the outcome of every battle, with every amateur fight. You cannot be overly concerned with that. Not saying that we don't want to win, but we always want to prioritize learning and getting better and using the sport to become the best, strongest, most successful version of ourselves. Not that winning doesn't have its place and that we shouldn't strive to win, but it can't be the overall goal. It's like chasing money, right? And almost all successful people will tell you, if you just chase the money, you'll never really be happy, because there'll always be somebody with more money. And even if you're the wealthiest person on Forbes 500, you're going to be constantly struggling to always make more money so you can stay ahead of the pace. When in all reality, if you fall in love with the journey, whatever it is that you're doing to make that money, right? If you're building a business, right? If you're building computers, if you're designing computers, if you're designing software, if you're designing products, if you're building other businesses, and you love that, and you just do that because you love it, you're going to find happiness. You're going to find fulfillment. Very similarly, combat sports is exactly the same. You cannot chase the W in every single sparring match. You cannot chase the W in every single situation. Not only will you not be happy, but many times when I see that, it stunts a person's growth. They are too scared to experiment with new techniques, with new angles, with new concepts, because they have to get the W. All right, guys. So that's what I have for, the heavy talk this afternoon. Let's go ahead and let's move on, because we got some fun stuff to get to. So first off, let's talk about the NBA talking head crazies. All right, guys, like seriously, can we back away from the crazy talk? Can you stop trying to get people to be interested in the NBA, in November? Give me a break, okay? There's a reason why ABC, ESPN really start pushing the NBA right around Christmas Day, right around, the time that, football is starting to wind down, and we know that, pretty much which teams are getting into the playoffs for sure and which teams might make the playoffs, right? And it's just ridiculous. Stop trying to sell me on this. I mean, the reality is that you could be well below 500 at the midpoint of the season, and still have a reasonable shot to make the playoffs. I mean, you have teams that made the playoffs last year. I think in the West, they had 47 wins, and you had a playoff team, I want to say, in the East that had 43 wins. That's like a game over 500, like 2 games over 500, something ridiculous like that. I mean, come on, stop messing with me. 16 teams make the playoffs in the NBA. I believe there's only 30 of them. So come on, guys, really, seriously, stop trying to make me care about the NBA by making all these, fluffed up, oh my gosh, do we need to be worried? LeBron James and the Lakers, they lost 3 straight games in late October, early November. Oh my gosh, oh no, give me a break. Just give me a break. Like, this is one of the reasons why I don't even like to talk NBA this early part, or I guess it's late part of the year, is because it's too early into the season. It doesn't mean anything. It means absolutely nothing right now. So it's just malarkey. The only thing that has any kind of traction that they've been talking about as far as how it's going to affect things down the road, okay, and I don't even know that it affected this season, is the whole KD and God dog it, Draymond thing. That's the only thing that could possibly have an effect on basketball down into the future, the foreseeable future. And that's simply because we know that KD doesn't like to be challenged that way. Basically being told he's a B, and that, we won without you, leave. Well, okay then. Now, all the speculation about him going to the Lakers and this and that, I really don't know that I would see him do something like that, but who knows? The insiders that supposedly talk to these guys probably know a little bit more about that than I. However, from a fan perspective, let me just say it's annoying. It's annoying for you to start trying to sell me to care about NBA games right now. It's annoying. Knock it off. It's not fun. It's just annoying. You're wasting my time. Talk about stuff I care about. right now at this time of the year. Which brings us to college football. There was nothing too spectacular or too overwhelming, but this idea that they're already trying to sell you in the event that Georgia upsets Alabama. And I think the reason why they're saying this is because you're starting to see a little bit of a trend. I need to put the numbers together. But you're seeing a little bit of a trend out of Alabama that now, while they've shut LSU out, you also notice they didn't score as many points. So their scoring production, well, their defense has stepped it up and stopped people from scoring. When they're facing these better defenses, they're also not scoring as many points. So their explosiveness is coming down. You also saw that Michigan, up until this week, was starting to kind of rise in that category of putting up bunches of points. So almost looking like not only, and the same with Notre Dame, not only were their defenses starting to play better, but their offenses were starting to play better. And so there, you already saw the SEC fanboys running around trying to carry the water for the SEC. And well, there's all these ways that there could be a 2-loss SEC team over a 1-loss Michigan team and undefeated teams and blah blah blah. Maybe Notre Dame gets left out and Durka. Like, give me a break. Are you kidding me? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And more so now than ever, you see how horrible this ranking system is. You see that barely now is UCF above Syracuse. Clearly they're above Syracuse. That, I think we all saw that this weekend. And after what I saw out of Ohio State, I don't understand why they're not ranked above Ohio State, to be completely honest. Now, maybe with the whole, it's a rivalry game, Ohio State plays close against Michigan, maybe. But right now, from what I've seen on the football field out of these teams, it looks like it's going to be a slaughter. It looks like Shea Patterson is going to go in there, lead that offense, put up 42, 48 points, and that defense is going to shut down Ohio State to like maybe 10, 14 points. Because I am not impressed. I am not impressed at all with the way Ohio State has been playing. So, this ridiculous talk of a 2-loss SEC team, I'm going to say this. If Notre Dame and Michigan win out and somehow one of those teams gets left out because, let's say Alabama or even Clemson, maybe, I doubt it, but, Alabama is the one I think they're really trying to shield here, somehow steps on their own foot and loses a game, well, that's just too damn bad. If you don't win the SEC, you don't have any business in the playoff. That's just the long and short of it. Their bad teams are just as bad as anybody else's in the nation. Their bad teams are bad. I just stop with the how good the SEC is. It's good, don't get me wrong. Their top teams are good. But their bad teams are just as bad as anyone else's, and they have just as many good teams as bad teams in their conference. So please just stop with that malarkey. Their bad teams are horrible. Anyhow, that's what I got for you guys. Nothing really changing in college football, but we will get into, after Thanksgiving, a little bit more about college football and the draft, because we'll also be able to talk about what NFL teams are drafting, where we see people going and why. So anyhow, that'll be some fun, but we won't talk about that till after Thanksgiving because we should have a clearer picture of the playoff order or who's going to be in the playoff hunt for the NFL, which will also kind of give us an idea of who's out of the playoffs and therefore who's going to be in that top, 1 to 10, 1 to 5 draft position. So we'll take a look at that. All right, man, let's move on. All right, so you had UFC Fight Night. I believe it was 140 this weekend. There was some pretty good fights there. Neil Magny dropped one to Ponzinibbio by KO in round 4, and Ricardo Lamas beat Darren Elkins versus KO in round 3. So, you know, there were some pretty decent fights on the card, pretty fun, pretty entertaining. But what I wanted to talk about, and we touched at this at the beginning of the show, is this whole DC thing. I mean, really, I'm getting really annoyed with some of the fighters coming to DC's defense and talking about how DC does not have to fight Jon Jones to solidify his place and UFC, you know, legacy, or as the GOAT, or for his legacy. Well, here's my thing. I don't think he does either if he's satisfied with the legacy that he has. Okay? That being said, you know, I distinctly remember DC himself bringing up the idea that if he were to beat Stipe, that he would have to be mentioned, or he would have to be in the conversation for greatest pound-for-pound fighter of all time. Now, that came out of DC's own mouth. Now, that what that says to me is that he's conscious of his own legacy. If he's conscious of his own legacy, then for him to continuously have this nonchalant, dismissive kind of attitude when it comes to a potential fight with Jon Jones, it's extremely disingenuous. It's just very disingenuous of DC. Like, either you're fighting for your legacy, you believe you should be mentioned, like, in the breath when we're talking about the greatest of all time, and if so, if you believe that, then it's on you to solidify that. Because it's not the fans. It's not like just the fans are running around going, greatest of all time, best pound for pound. It's not the fans that are just running around and just saying it. It came out of DC's mouth as well. Now, I can't say where it came out of first, if it came out of, you know, the media first, or if it came from the fans first, or if it came from DC first, but it was pretty early on when the whole Stipe fight was even starting to get kicked around that, you know, DC started talking about the possibility of being greatest pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So we have to take that into consideration. When DC says he wants to fight for legacy and money, pretty much there's only 3 fights that he can take at this point. Okay, number 1 is Brock. Now, that's not going to add to his legacy, but definitely it should help his money situation. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's going to put bucks in his pocket, right? He's going to make some mega bucks for his pocketbook. He might be the B side, which is kind of a little crappy for him because, you know, he's the champ, so he should be the A side. But the reality is he'll most likely be the B side. But here's the reality with DC, and this is why I don't think, you know, the whole idea that he can't, you know, that he doesn't want to fight Stipe for whatever reason is a bunch of malarkey, is that DC has never, you know, had more than 300,000 pay-per-views without Stipe or Jon Jones. As a headliner, he has never broken that mark. So he's not the draw that he seems to think that he is, or seems to be selling the public. The next fight, of course, would be Jon Jones if Jon Jones wins against Gustafsson, and if he's healthy enough to do a relatively quick turnaround fight, right? Sometime in, you know, end of February, you know, March, somewhere in there. That should get us under that. I think it's the 40-year mark, you know, 40-year-old mark that DC put out there. And then, you know, the next fight after that for legacy and for money is probably Stipe, doing the rematch with Stipe. Now, what it does is it shuts down and it puts to bed the idea that, well, you trained for a specific, you know, punch, and, you know, 9 out of 10 times Stipe wins. I think most MMA fans believe that. I think most MMA fans believe that 9 out of 10 times Stipe beats him, right? So he got his 10th time on the first try, but if they were to fight again, Stipe beats him. I think most fans believe that. And even if it's not most fans, I think most fans could buy into that. So you could make money and it solidifies your legacy. And then on an outside chance, right? Let's say all three of those fights. I think those are the three main fights that DC can fight that solidify his legacy and put money in his pocketbook. Well, the Brock Lesnar really doesn't solidify his legacy, but all three of those fights put money in his pocketbook. But on the outside chance none of those can happen, he needs to fight the winner of the Curtis Blades and Ngannou fight, whom I believe is going to be Curtis Blades. Okay, so let's say Curtis Blades wins that fight, and let's say he wins and doesn't take too much damage, and he's ready for a quick turnaround. He's an outside fourth possibility, because now you would have not only beaten the champ, okay, but now you would have beaten a legitimate top two contender. I mean, let's just be real. I mean, I like Derek Lewis. I do. He's a super entertaining fighter to watch. But he never deserved the shot against DC. He never deserved a title shot. I mean, that's just real. I mean, I'm just being real. He didn't deserve that shot, and everybody knows he didn't deserve that shot. And that's probably why the pay-per-view numbers were so horrible. Because everybody knew what are you going to buy this fight for? And he doesn't deserve to be in there. So, you know, on the outside shot that those three fights would not be available to DC, probably fighting the winner of Curtis Blades and Ngannou, especially if the winner happened to be Curtis Blades, because Curtis Blades is a much more well-rounded fighter than Ngannou, right? And so it wouldn't be, you know, the knockout artist or headhunter that was just coming looking for the headshot and didn't have any wrestling or any kind of ground game to offer in resistance to DC's wrestling, right? I think Curtis Blades is a much better wrestler than Ngannou. He has a much better ground game. So, you know, that would be a fun fight to watch. Next, let's talk a little bit about Conor McGregor. So Conor came out not that long ago and said, you know, if it wasn't the rematch with Khabib, then next man up, he was ready to go. And some people are kicking around Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor too. However, I don't see that happening, because I don't know that, you know, Conor is going to go back down to 145. And I don't see why Aldo would come up to 155. I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense I mean, maybe if they did a catch weight fight just for the sake of making money, they could do it. Maybe 150, but I mean, 155 I think is already a relatively tough weight to make for Conor. I mean, Conor, we saw him at the 170, you know, pound weight class. And so 155 I think is already a tough weight for him to make. So why go down another 5 pounds? If I'm going to go down to 150, I might as well go down to 145, right? I mean, I don't know. That's just my opinion. The other thing that's been kind of rumored right now is him versus Cowboy. With Cowboy's, you know, great win against Perry just recently, you know, that looks like an intriguing fight, because Cowboy, it looks like maybe he's matured and he's understanding how to fight smart and not just rely on his toughness. Like, he's always had really, really good technique as far as standing goes. He even had really good technique on the ground. What has always been Cowboy's kind of Achilles heel is the fact that sometimes he's too tough for his own good, and he wants to go kind of prove a point, and he'll throw with people in the middle, he'll stand and trade, and that's probably not the best idea. Now, I think it's a tough matchup for Cowboy if he's not going to fight super smart, right? I think that Conor, he likes to stand, he likes to get in close, he likes to fight from a boxing range, and we've seen Cowboy have some issues with boxers, right, with that boxing style. When you get into that boxing range and you keep it in that boxing range, we've had him see some issues with that kind of pressure. But if he's learned and he's gotten better and he's more mature fighter and he's saying, well, I don't always have to do what, they want to do, and I'll go ahead and get this fight to the ground. I think that, his jiu-jitsu and, his ground game is a lot better than people tend to give him credit for. I don't know that it's going to be Khabib level, right? Ground game that's going to dominate Conor, but I give him a lot better shot of basically taking Conor into deep water, right? I think that he could definitely KO Conor outside of the first round. I think he has a hard time KOing Conor in the first round just because of the way the distance is going to be managed and manipulated. I don't think Conor's going to, be there for the long rangy kicks, for that Muay Thai style of kicking. I think that Conor will close that distance and get it into the boxing range. And so I think the best thing that, Cowboy can do is tie it up, look for some type of sweep, some type of throw, get it to the ground, wear out Conor, take out of his gas tank. Because the other thing we've seen about Conor and his power is that his power tends to fade as his cardio tends to fade, right? As his cardio fades, so does his power. So I think it'd be a really interesting, fun fight because it's not as cut and dry as, well, one guy's bigger, one guy's, smaller. Like now we know that Conor definitely is a true 155er. He can be there. And, we've seen that, he can obviously take a pretty good punch. I mean, that punch that Khabib caught him with was pretty square and solid. Both guys would be kind of on a mission to get to the title shot. So it would be a fun fight. I think that's probably the one that makes the most sense when it comes to Conor. Then we have Shevchenko fighting Joanna coming up. And a lot of people, I don't know. I mean, I really don't understand why it's Joanna over Nico Montano. I mean, other than the fact, I understand Nico missed weight. I do that. I understand that. I understand that she's had issues. I get that, okay? But Joanna is so small. I really don't even see this being a competitive fight. If I'm going to be honest, I really think Shevchenko is going to just beat her down. I see this being like very similar to what Joanna did to Cookie Monster, in her fight. I see Shevchenko doing to Joanna. I don't see this fight going past probably round one. Like, I just don't see it going much further than round one. I think it's a TKO or a KO, and that's all there is to it. And I really feel like Nico would bring more than that. I feel like Nico would make it into a dogfight. It would be scrappy. Even if Nico isn't the greatest, let's say you're saying, well, her striking isn't this, her striking isn't that, blah, 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 blah. No, but I see her heart and her tenacity and her toughness being up there. And so I think she could really, make it into at least a fun fight to watch, at least a fight that is intriguing to watch. I just don't think Joanna's big enough for this division. That's just my opinion on it. Next, you have the idea of Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren. So people are rumoring now that that's going to be the break-in fight for Ben. And some people are already talking a lot of smack about Ben being able to just run through the division. Well, guess what? They're not giving him an easy fight. Robbie, he's dealt really well with wrestling first type of guys. He dealt really well with Johnny Hendricks both fights. He dealt well against Jake Ellenberger. He dealt well with all these guys that want to take the fight down to the ground. Rory McDonald, tried to take him down, shot a really beautiful double, looked like he would take down most people. I want to say it was in the third round. He shot a double and he got super deep on it, and Robbie was still able to sprawl and get away from it. So Robbie's ability to sprawl and have good takedown defense, and when he's taken down, able to get back to his feet quickly, is really underrated. So I don't know what people are thinking that that's an easy fight. I don't think it's an easy fight at all. I think Robbie Lawler, is a dangerous opponent, is a tough opponent for Ben Askren. It's a heck of an ask to ask him to cut his teeth in the UFC against Robbie Lawler. And I kind of have the feeling that, and I want to say Chael said something to the same effect, that it's almost like the UFC. It's almost like Dana White saying, "Okay, you keep talking smack and saying we didn't want you and this and that, and it was because we didn't want you because we didn't want to, kiss your rear end and because you'd have wiped the floor with our guys. Okay, you think you'd have wiped the floor with our guys? Come on, we're gonna sign you. Here you go. Here's this guy for your first, and throwing him right into the wolves, right? Because the long and short of it is UFC wins no matter what. If Ben Askren beats up Robbie Lawler, awesome. They got a new hype train to jump on. If he gets beat up, they got to go, see, we told you there was a reason why we're still the best promotion in the world. And if he wins, they're going to say, see, we told you we're the best promotion in the world. We bring the best guys in, right? So it's a no-lose situation for the UFC and Dana White. So I think that's a pretty interesting fight. Next, we got to talk a little bit about Mayweather. I mean, I don't know what's going on with the whole Tenson thing. I really don't. I'm going to have to look deeper into it. But it makes you question whether or not Mayweather needs money. I mean, why would he fight this guy? It doesn't make any sense. Even when it was first announced, it doesn't make any sense. So I don't even know why he's fighting the guy. The only thing I could think of is that somehow he wants to parlay this into his stepping stone into promoting MMA, because the kid is an MMA fighter. But other than that, I just don't see the angle. I mean, if you're just doing this for straight money, then wouldn't Maymac 2 make more sense? I mean, I don't know. It just does. I mean, even like the Khabib fight, doesn't that make more sense? A Khabib mock. I mean, doesn't even a exhibition against Khabib make more sense? Where it's like, okay, we box for one round, then we wrestle for one round, and then we do one round where I'm boxing and you're trying to wrestle me, okay, or something like that. Doesn't that make more sense as far as if you're just doing it for the money? Because the people you don't have to sell to the big market, to the capitalist market, to the merchandising market, which is the U.S. Like, you don't have to worry about that. But, I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then we have, lastly, the Ortega-Holloway fight. Really want to start getting into this one early, guys. I want to know what you guys think about this. Please comment or something. Doesn't matter. Reply, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever it takes. Look, here's the way I see it. You have a matchup of two different mentalities in my estimation. I think with Holloway you have a tenacity, a toughness mentality, and almost like, you've seen him do his little things in the octagon where he points at the ground and is like, right here, meet me right here, we'll go toe to toe, throw, punch for punch, trade. And you have Brian Ortega, to me, who is a much more cerebral fighter. I think that he's really taken on the kind of cerebral idea of fighting that jiu-jitsu coaches bring, that Henner has kind of, I think instilled in him as a young man, which is, I'm going to look for the weaknesses. I'm going to try and exploit your weaknesses. I'm going to do these things. I am in the flow of the fight. We'll look at my opportunities. I'll take what you give me, but I'm not going to simply go in there and trade with you. I will look for the tactical advantage at all times, right? And so I think that that's the very first part I want to talk about, is just the tactical differences. I don't see Max Holloway as being a guy who comes in with a lot of game plan. Like, I don't know. I've watched his fights, and it doesn't seem like he comes in super determined to say, hey, we saw this, we're going to take this tactical advantage. It seems like he goes in and he thinks that he's going to outwork, outlast, outrun his opponents. And I just don't think that, well, I believe Brian Ortega probably feels that way. I mean, I think every fighter thinks that. I think that Brian Ortega tries to find a tactical advantage. He looks for ways to win, right? Having, kind of like that philosophical, Bruce Lee, like be like be like water, be like the nature of water, right? You know, conform to whatever container, right? Fit into the smallest crack, right? So that you can win. Overall, you will win the fight. So it's interesting because right off the bat, I think philosophically, as fighters, you have two very contradicting kind of mentalities, in my opinion. And so I think that makes for a super interesting fight. We'll start breaking it down even more. We're going to get into styles probably in the next couple of weeks. We'll talk about, Ortega's striking style versus, Holloway's striking style, because I think you have two different types of styles in striking even. I think, Ortega's a little bit more boxing, and Holloway's a little more kickboxing. But we're going to get a little deeper into that. And then we'll even talk about their jiu-jitsu and, takedowns or takedown defenses, or, what do they do in those situations. So it's going to be fun, guys. I really hope you guys, give me some feedback so we can talk about some of those things and we can make our calls when the night comes, because that's a fight I'm definitely going to catch. Okay, guys, it's time to move on. Let's move on to some more stuff. All right, guys, so I know this video is a little bit later than usual, and the reason why was I really wanted to catch that Chiefs-Rams game before I put up this video, because I thought it might be a little bit, interesting if maybe we saw something collapse or one team dominate, but instead what we saw was we have two amazing, I mean absolutely amazing offensive teams. It was a great game, super entertaining, really fun to watch, and if you haven't checked it out, man, it might be worth the cash to invest in Game Pass and check it out, man. So with that, here we see what the playoff picture would look like if the playoffs began today, right? We have the Chiefs and Steelers as the 1 and 2 seeds in the AFC. We got the Rams and Saints as 1 and 2 seeds in the NFC. And then we have the Ravens, Chargers, Texans, and Patriots rounding off the AFC playoff picture. The Vikings, the Bears, the Panthers, and the Redskins rounding off their playoff, the NFC's playoff picture. So of these teams, who do we think may not quite make the cut? Well, I'm pretty positive the Patriots are going to win their division. I mean, if you look at their division, they're by far probably the best team in their division, so I think that they're going to win it. The Chargers division, don't really know, kind of back and forth. The one that really looks like they could slip away is the Ravens, and not because the other teams in their division are so good, but just because they're kind of at a mediocre point right now. And you see a similar kind of pattern with the Vikings and the Redskins over in the NFC, right? So you see the Vikings are, in the playoffs right now as the 6th seed, the last wild card, but, just barely there. And the Redskins, they look like they were in control of the NFC East, like they should be able to close out the NFC East. But then we saw that big injury to Alex Smith, and now it looks like they're going with Mark Sanchez as the backup. I don't know if that means eventually he's going to start or if they're going to start him immediately. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But that just really changes, I think, what the Redskins are. I'm a big fan and always have been a big fan of Alex Smith. I always thought that he was very underrated as a quarterback. I think he has very high football IQ, and he's the type of quarterback that can make some plays. He doesn't have the biggest arm, but he's pretty accurate. He can still get the ball down the field. He can put touch on the ball. And the biggest thing is that while he does give you, a decent amount of offense, a respectable amount of offense, he doesn't put you in danger of a lot of big mistakes. And I'm not so sure that that's the type of quarterback that Mark Sanchez is. So really not feeling that. The surprise team for me that's really didn't look like they were going to start out strong, or they didn't start out strong, but looks like they're playing really well right now, is the Bears. And it seems like what they've done is actually take the handcuffs off of Trubisky and kind of let him be himself a little bit more. He's a little bit of everything. He's a little bit of running quarterback. He's a little bit of throwing quarterback. He doesn't quite have a big arm, but he can do some things as far as moving around and scrambling. He, can throw kind of on the run, but he can also be a little relaxed inside the pocket. He's not perfect. He's not a Brady-esque pick you apart quarterback, but he will scramble and make you be accountable for him as a runner if you get lazy in your rush, in your pass rush, right? As a defenseman, if you're down lineman and you're rushing the passer, or you're blitzing and you get sloppy, or you get undisciplined and you don't do what you're supposed to do, which is control the gaps, and you just come out of control, Mitch is going to step up and take it for a few yards on you. He's going to make you pay for that. And so that's been working to his benefit, I think. He's really looked like an efficient quarterback. It's kind of surprising. I really didn't expect that out of him. So next, we have the playoff, or the teams that are still in the playoff hunt, I should say. Right? Over in the AFC, we have the Bengals, Dolphins, Colts, Titans, Broncos, Browns, Bills, Jaguars, Jets. I think the Raiders are still alive in it. We have in the NFC the Seahawks, the Cowboys, the Packers, the Falcons, the Lions, the Eagles, the Giants, the Buccaneers, the Cardinals, and I believe the 49ers are still alive. It's kind of funny because, you would think that 3-6 teams, 4-6 teams, even 5-5 teams at this point of the season would probably be maybe in the hunt for a wild card, but some of these teams are in the hunt to actually win their division. For instance, the Cowboys, they look like they could be the front runner to win the division with the major, injury to Alex Smith. I'm a big Cowboy fan, and, from my perspective, that would be, how would you say, it would continue the pain and suffering of Cowboy fans, right? Just limping along, always thinking that, oh, it's going to be great. But in all reality, if the Cowboys win the NFC East, I think it just prolongs the death, right? Basically, we're a brain dead corpse, right? Because the reality is that as much as I like Dak as a person, I really like Dak. He's a great guy. I just don't think he's still playing that well. He's just not really playing that well. You look at the Cowboys' victories, and what they all have in common is that they keep unleashing Ezekiel Elliott. And if Ezekiel does not have a monster game, they can't win football games. That's what it comes down to. The defense has to play well too, of course. They don't have to play out of their mind, though. But Zeke does. Zeke has to play out of his mind. He has to put up godly-like numbers for them to win. The rest of these teams that are in the playoff hunt, some of them might make it because they're still able to possibly win their division. But really, the Cowboys are the team that I think has a true shot at winning their division and being the team that nobody thought was going to be in the playoffs 2 weeks ago, to winning their division and getting bounced in the first round. Okay, guys. I really was hoping that the playoff picture would be a little more clear coming into this week, but clearly it's not. So we'll probably have to address it again after Thanksgiving and push back that whole draft kind of, preview even further, because clearly we have a bunch of teams that are still in the hunt. So I think they're going to keep trying to win until they are mathematically eliminated, which the way some of these teams are playing might not be until like week 14. So anyhow, guys. We'll catch you later. Hopefully there's nothing too crazy this weekend. Remember, be practical, be purposeful, get fit with a purpose.